Torah Life Ministries come out of the world. Messiah people seek the truth.
Hello everybody, this is Paul Nisa with Torah Life Ministries and Shabbat Shalom. This is this coming week's Torah portion, and if you don't know, you should know that the Torah portion is the foundation of all scripture. We take a reading each week from the first 5 books of the Bible, going in order throughout all the scriptures, and now we're starting in Genesis at the beginning. This is the 4th reading that I'm doing in this series, and this week we're actually going to be reading Genesis 18:1 to 22:24. So get your Bibles and sit down and get ready for this week's Torah portion, which on a Shabbat, which is on Saturday, everyone sits down and they read this together and they study it. Well, you could listen to it now and you can get a head start on everyone else, okay? Well, we're going to look at what it says here in this week's reading, and we're going to go through it, not exactly word by word, but we will pretty much get through it line by line. And this is just a brief teaching. There's a much longer teaching that you could do with your congregation or fellowship or even by yourself. But it's so important to go through each week or every day or every year. You want to make sure you read all the first 5 books of the scriptures and all the other books as well. But this is what the foundation of all the scriptures is all about. Torah means instructions and guideline, and these are the instructions and guideline of our Creator. True, we're saved by the blood of Messiah, but if we're truly saved, we should have every desire to do what He wanted us to do. Well, how will we know what He wanted us to do if we don't read His Word? And this is where in His Word it tells us in the Torah. So we're looking at Bereshit, Genesis 18:1 to 22:24 today, and we're going to be discussing this. And there are some things in here that not even I have and I say not even I like I'm someone special. I'm no one special. I'm just reading you the scriptures. But I don't even have the understanding of some of these that we'll discuss. And I can tell you what I think it means. But, you know, there's a lot of different opinions about some of these things on the internet and just in studies all over the world for a very long time. But a lot of these things are very clear. So I'm going to give you these things now. I'm going to discuss them. So here we go. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is going to start off in Genesis 18:1. It says, our Creator appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Merim as he sat down at the entrance to the tent during the heat of the day. So you have Abraham sitting there, and our Creator appeared to him. Now that's important that it says our Creator appeared to Abraham. Now up till now He's been appearing to Abraham, as we know from Scripture, through speaking to him. But now we see something different. We see Him actually appearing before him. Now, there's some people say nobody's ever seen Him, but this scripture might change that around. It says, as Abraham sat at the entrance during the heat of the day, Abraham raised his eyes and looked, and there in front of him stood 3 men. 3 men stood in front of Abraham. On seeing them, he ran from the tent to meet them. So these must have been important men. I mean, he didn't walk over to them. He didn't wait for them to come to him. He ran over to them. So he knew immediately that they were important men to meet them. And he prostrated himself on the ground. So now he knows these aren't only men. These are holy men. There's something about these men, you know. And he said to them, my Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, please don't leave your servant. So now he's calling them, you know, by Lord, and he's calling them by his, you know, Elohim, or he's saying, please, if you have found favor, don't leave them. Now, you know, true in England today, they might call people Lord just as a slang, but in those days, I don't believe it was done that way, and he knew that this was our very own Creator appearing in front of him right now in the form of these 3 men, and he says, you know, if I found favor in your sight, please don't leave your servant. Please let me send for water so that you can wash your feet, then rest under the tree, because it was hot out. So their feet must have been dirty if they were walking with sandals throughout the desert, and it was hot out. So under the tree, so you can get some shade. And I will bring you a piece of bread. In other words, I will bring you food. And he goes on to say, now that you have come to your servant, refresh yourselves before going on. And very well, they replied, do what you have said. So Abraham runs in his tent and he tells Sarah, you know, quickly, get 3 measures of flour, keen it and make cakes. And he ran to the herd and took a good tender calf and gave it to the servant, who hurried to prepare it. And then he took curd's milk of the calf, which he had prepared, and set it all before the men. And he stood by them under the tree as they ate. Now this is very interesting, because in the Jewish religion, when you look at the kosher laws and all the laws, besides keeping the Shabbat, there's probably no law that they keep more than not mixing meat and milk together. But here we see Abraham giving milk and meat together to these three people, and they actually ate it with thanksgiving. They didn't reject it. And if this kosher law about not eating milk and meat together was a true kosher guideline, there's no way these people would have took it and defiled themselves. So when you think about in history, where did that come from, that the traditional Jewish Orthodox people wouldn't eat milk and meat in the same meal as their oral Torah says, not the written word, but their oral Torah, because we see the written word actually going against that. We look at that had nothing to do with food, folks. And this is an idea, when it says in the scriptures, do not add or take away from my word, but keep the guidelines and instructions. It says, but keep all the guidelines and instructions of our Creator. He meant that. Do not add or take away. Well, there was a pagan ritual in those days, and that pagan ritual said, you know, you basically, you'll kill an animal, you'll kill even your own child, you'll sacrifice your own child, and you'll take the blood of either the animal or your child and sprinkling it over the land of those days. And so the next year's harvest will be very great and it'll be wonderful. So the scripture says, do not cook a child in its mother's milk, or do not cook a goat or a lamb or an animal in its mother's blood. And that was the pagan tradition. So the guideline to be set apart was not to do what they're doing. It had nothing to do with eating meat and milk together. So when you see do not cook a kid in its mother's milk, that is the scripture that they used to say, well, we shouldn't be eating milk and meat together. No, it was a pagan tradition. We were to be set apart and not do it, so we didn't end up doing what they were doing. But so we see here they did take the meat, the milk and the calf that he prepared, and they ate it, you know. And after that, they stood under the tree and they all ate. And then they said to him, where is Sarah your wife? And he said, there in the tent. And then it says, now it says he said after that. So they asked him, these three men, where's Sarah your wife? And Abraham replied, in the tent, there in the tent. So now you have Abraham standing under the tree with these three men, and Sarah's in the tent. And then it says, and all translations are slightly different, but I'm using today the complete Jewish Bible, which is, I've used other translations for this as well, and I've took notes from other translations, but I like this here. It says, he said, I will certainly return to you around this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son. Now first of all, it didn't say they said, it says he said. So now it's one person addressed as he, not they. So whoever this was, these three men, it didn't say they, it said he said this. Next year, right now, I will return, and Sarah your wife will have a son. Well, who can actually make that prophecy? There's only one that can make that prophecy, and that's our Creator Himself. And that's what He said. But then we look at this here, and we says, Sarah heard from the entrance of the tent behind him. So the tent was behind him, but not too far from this tree. Either they were talking very loud, or either that fellow that said that was talking very loud, or the tent was very close to the tree. And it says, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So she laughed in the tent and she said, I am old, and so is my husband. Am I to have pleasure again? Well, you know, when the kid was named Isaac, and Isaac actually means laughter. Because when Abraham and Sarah were told that they were going to have another kid at this age, they laughed. Now, that's very understandably so, because how can you not laugh? I mean, when you're way past, they weren't just past, they were way past the age of childbearing. And appearing to this, what Sarah said, they weren't even trying to have a child. I guess they couldn't. Maybe Abraham needed some Viagra or something else. But it says they were past the age of childbearing, and at least to say that they weren't even trying to make a baby, but they both laughed. And then it says, after she said that, our Creator said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and ask, Am I really going to bear a child when I am so old? Is anything too hard for the Creator? So the Creator is saying this. So now it's directly saying that this is the Creator asking. And it says, at the time set for it, this season next year, I will return to you. I will return to you. So there our Creator was right there in the flesh. And I believe in the flesh our Creator is Yeshua himself. And there he is, Yeshua standing in front of Abraham. Yes, Yeshua is not only revealing himself in a renewed covenant, he's there right there. I'll return to you, and Sarah will have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I didn't laugh, so she must have either run out of the tent, or she must have said it from the tent. I didn't laugh. And then our Creator said, no, you did laugh. And she said, I was afraid. I was just afraid. I didn't laugh. I was just scared. And she said, no, you did laugh. I heard you laugh. And I knew you laughed. Because I'm the Creator and I know all things. Then it goes on to say here in Genesis 18:16, the men set out from there and looked over towards Sodom. Now Sodom, remember, was where Lot chose his land and where Lot was. And Abraham went with them. So he went with them, the three men, to see them on their way. And then it says that our Creator said, and I guess he was talking to the other two men, which were angels, by the way. He said, should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Is as much as Abraham is sure to become great and a strong nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. So we know that was happening because that's what the covenant he made, and that's what he promised Abraham. In the recently readings that we've done, it says, for I have made myself known to him, so that he will give orders to his children and to his household after him to keep the way of the Creator and to do what is right and just, so that a wonderful Creator may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. So the only way Abraham can get the promise or the covenant that was made was to do his part. And here it is, it's the only way he can get it. And this is very powerful because this is probably one of the most powerful things that people overlook in the scriptures. We see here in the scriptures, Genesis 18:19. I'm going to read this again, and I don't want you to miss it. For I have made myself known to him. So the Creator revealed himself to him previously through speak to him, and now right there in the flesh. And he reveals himself to us as well in the form of Messiah. But why does he reveal himself to us? This is why. So that he will give orders to his children and to his household after him. And we are to give our children, our descendants, and our household after us orders. And those orders are the orders found in the Torah, the guidelines and instructions of our Creator. And here it says to confirm that, to keep the way. The way. When Yeshua came, he said they follow my way. They were known as followers of the way of Messiah. They keep the way, which is the Torah. So we could say after him. So they keep the Torah, the way of our Creator, and to do what is right and just. To do what is right and just. So our Creator may be able to bring Abraham what he has promised. And also to bring us what he has promised. So if you're a believer in Yeshua Messiah, the only way you can receive that grace is to keep the ways of Yeshua Messiah, which was Torah. Somebody speak to me. That's what it's saying right there, everybody. So this is so important. So for those of you that think, we don't need to follow or do any works because we have grace. Well, I'm telling you, if you're not doing something about it, you don't have grace, because it says here the only way you can have the grace, or at least keep the grace that's been given to you, is to follow the way of Messiah. That's it right there, folks. I'm going to read that again. That's pretty powerful. Let's say if you say it 3 times, but it sticks with people. So we're in Genesis 18:19. For I have made myself known to him, so that he will give orders to his children and to his household to keep the way of our Creator and to do what is right and just, so that our Creator may bring about to Abraham what he has promised him. Powerful, powerful stuff. And people overlook this stuff. We need to read these things and understand them. Then we go into 18:20 of Genesis. And so it says, our Creator said, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, their sin is so serious. So this is what he's saying, that I will now go and see whether their deeds warrant the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. So he said, I want to see for myself if this is true. And he already saw it, so he knew it was true. But he wanted to go there, and he sent his angels there to take care of business. And we're going to see here what that sin that he called so serious was. And as we see here and later in this reading, that serious sin was homosexuality. You know, people ask or say, you know, where is it mentioned in the scriptures? Well, it's mentioned right here. The outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great that their sin is so serious, and their sin was homosexuality. That our Creator calls a serious sin. He calls it an abomination, and he calls it something that should never be done. And the outcry is going to be the destruction that happens to Sodom and Gomorrah. Guess what? It says in the scriptures the times aren't too much different, you know, now than they were back then. And we see exactly what happened. It says the times when Yeshua Messiah returns is going to be just like the times of Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, why did Yeshua Messiah, why did he return back then? He returned back then to take care of business. And the business was not something you want to hear about, folks, because this was serious stuff. It says, I will go now and see whether the deeds warrant the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. Then it goes on to say in Genesis 18:22, the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom. But Abraham remained standing before our wonderful Creator. And Abraham approached and said, will you actually sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Maybe there will be 50 righteous people in the city. Will you actually sweep the place away and not forgive it for the sake of the 50 righteous of the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike? Far be it from you. Shouldn't the judge of all of the earth do what is just? And our Creator said, if I find in Sodom 50 who are righteous, then I will forgive the whole place for their sake. So here we have Abraham negotiating with the Father. He's negotiating him. But why is he negotiating with him? To preserve and save the righteous few. Because he knew himself he was one of the righteous, you know, amongst all the people around. And he didn't want the land to be completely destroyed, you know, for the sake of everyone else's deeds, because he was one of the righteous that would have been taken away. Now, not Sodom and Gomorrah, but the land Abraham was no different. And Abraham didn't want to be taken away either in the unrighteousness of the land. So here he is telling our Creator, if there's any righteous there, why destroy everyone? Well, Abraham answered again, hear now, who am I but dust and ashes? I have taken upon myself to speak to our Creator. What if there is 5 less than 50 righteous? He said, I won't destroy it even if there are 45 righteous. So Abraham's really getting testy here, or getting kind of brave, or I don't know what you want to call it, but he's trying to negotiate with our Creator. He said, again, in Genesis 18:29, he spoke to him again. He said, what if 40 are found righteous? And our Creator said, for the sake of 40, I won't do it. And Abraham said again, I hope our Creator won't be angry if I speak. What if 30 are found there? And our Creator answered, I won't do it if I found 30 there. Abraham said again, here now I have taken it upon myself to speak to our Creator. What if just 20, only 20 righteous are in the land? You know, and our Creator said, for the sake of 20, I won't destroy it. But Abraham kept going. He said, you know, don't be angry with me if I speak once more. What if there are only 10 there that are righteous? And our Creator said, for the sake of 10, I won't destroy it. And then our Creator went on his way as soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So Abraham finally went on his way, and to catch up with the other 2 angels he sent ahead, and he said, if there are at least 10 righteous in the land, I won't destroy the land. 10 righteous. There weren't 10 righteous in the land, folks, because the land was destroyed. There were a couple of righteous there. You know, it goes on 19:1 to say, the 2 angels came to Sodom that evening. So now the 2 angels came, not 3, because remember, our Creator stayed behind talking to Abraham, so he was going to go catch up to them. And then he said, when Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom, Lot saw them, got up to greet them, and prostrated himself on the ground. So again, Lot himself knew, you know, who these men were. Lot knew. So Abraham knew, and Lot knew who these men were. They were revealed to him, and he knew who they were right away. Now, what was Lot doing sitting at the gate? You know, sitting at the gate. Well, in those days, the judges would sit at the gate, and they would have their daily meetings at the gate. So this tends to lead us to believe that Lot had some kind of of judgment, or he was some type of judge in the city. That's what it could have possibly been. Now, he could have just been sitting by the gate, listening to other judges judge the people. But it says Lot was sitting by the gate of Sodom. That's the entrance to Sodom. Or maybe he knew they were coming. Maybe somehow he knew they were coming. He saw them, got up to greet him, and prostrated himself on the ground. Now, first, we see Abraham. What did he do when he saw the holy men? He prostrated himself on the ground. What do we see Lot do when he saw the holy men? He prostrated himself on the ground. You know, the Torah is a guideline of how we are supposed to act in situations. And when we see somebody who's holy, or we hear a holy message, we are to get on the ground and prostrate ourselves. We are to just, this is what we're called to do. But people today, they give no reverence. They have no understanding. You know, if you're in a courtroom, when the judge comes in, you stand up, right? You know, well then why are people, they have no emotions, they have no actions, they don't do anything when they're in the presence of our Creator, when they go to their congregations or their churches or something else. No, you give him the respect he deserves. And he said, "Hear now," this is what Lot told them, "Hear now, you know, my lords." So I guess in those days they spoke to other people this way as well, and he spoke to the angels this well. "Hear now, please come over to your servant's house. Spend the night, wash your feet, get up early and go on your way." And they said, "No," they answered. So washing your feet, by the way, was another thing that was done. And didn't Messiah tell us that's a great way to humble ourselves, is to wash others' feet? Well, their feet must have been dirty, and it is a very humbling experience. So the feet washing thing wasn't something new that was created in the renewed covenant that Yeshua just did then. You know, this was a custom to do even prior to that. So it says, "No," they answered, "we will stay here in the square." But Lot kept pressing them. So they went home with him, and he made them a meal, baking them matzah for supper, which they ate. So we see, folks, here that there were several customs. Number one was washing their feet, and the other was welcoming him in the house for a meal. And this is what Abram did, and this is what Lot did. And Lot said, "There's no way you're staying out here in the square. You don't want to stay out here. You want to come in and stay at the house here." So they said, it goes on to say here in Genesis 19:4, "But before they can go to bed, the men of the city surrounded the house, young and old, everyone from every neighborhood of Sodom. They called Lot and said to him, 'Where are the men who came to stay with you tonight? Bring them out here to us.'" So the men surround the house, every man, young and old, and says, "Bring those men out here to us." So apparently those men in Sodom didn't know who these people were. They didn't prostrate themselves and say, "We want to clean their feet." No, they didn't know who he was. So it says in the scriptures, "I will reveal things to you when you're ready, or when you're holy. But if you're not, things will be kept from you." So here you have our Creator and his angels coming right to Lot and right out there to the people of Sodom. And it wasn't revealed who they actually were. You know, in the scripture it says that, you know, when you're ready, you'll be prepared. But if you're not prepared, he will come as a thief in the night. As a thief in the night. Well, here these people weren't prepared. And they got the surprise of their life. And they got just like a thief coming in the night. Because it says in the next sentence here, why the men surrounded the house? Because we want to have sex with them. The sin that was so great, folks, was the homosexuality. And here it was so great in the city. It says, we want to have sex with them. It said Lot went out to them. So he left the house. He went outside the door where they were. You know, and he stood outside the doorway, closing the door behind him. And he said, "Please, my brothers, don't go do such a wicked thing." So our Creator already referred to it as a serious sin. And Lot's referring it to here as such a wicked thing. It says, "Look here, I have 2 daughters who are virgins. Please let me bring them out to you so that you can do with them what seems good to you. But do not do anything to these men, since they are guests in my house." Well, these men just had one thing on their mind, and they wanted to commit this wicked sin. And Lot saying and knowing how wicked this sin is, he's offering his virgin daughters to these men, other than these 2 holy men. You know, when we see Abraham sacrificing Isaac, you know, that was a pretty powerful thing. Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, his only son, but here we see, Lot. Now Lot had many sons and daughters according to Scripture, but we see here there were 2 virgin daughters living in a house, and Lot, in replacement for a Creator and His angels, was going to sacrifice his 2 virgin daughters. Now I think that's a pretty amazing thing. What Abraham did was sacrificing his son to his only son. But I'm telling you this, I have a daughter, folks, and for Lot to sacrifice his, or not necessarily sacrifice, because maybe they wouldn't have killed the daughters, but to offer his 2 virgin daughters instead of the 2 angels, that was a pretty righteous act in itself. And it says, stand back, they replied. The guy came to live here, and now he decides to play judge. So maybe he was a judge, or maybe he was just judging the situation, but the men weren't hearing it. It says, for we will deal worse with you than we would deal with them. So these people wanted this, and they were about to get Lot, and this was becoming a situation here that wasn't too well. So our Creator is seeing firsthand, just as He came to confirm that the outcry from Sodom was just as bad as He knew it was. And it says, they crowded in on Lot in order to get close enough to break down the door, but the men inside reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house, and to tell them and to shut the door behind him. But the men reached outside with their hands. They brought Lot into the house, to them, and shut the door. And they struck the men outside with blindness, both small and great, so they couldn't find the doorway. So we see this here, and this is a wonderful, true historical story that's found in the Scriptures. Folks, if you're not reading the Torah, you don't know this. You cannot understand the words of Messiah and the idea of covenant unless you understand the history. Because what happened then is going to happen again now if we don't do something about this serious sin that is amongst our land. If there's not even 10 righteous, well, now we see here there weren't even 10 righteous in Sodom. And I can guarantee you there's not 10 righteous around where we are today. So we look at here what it says in Genesis 19:12. The men said to Lot, now these were not the men outside, these were the men, the angels that were in the house. It says, do you have any people here beside yourself, whomever you have in the city, your sons-in-laws, your sons and your daughters, bring them out of the place, because we are going to destroy it. So they told Lot to go and tell everyone. They didn't have a phone or the internet where they could let everyone know. Lot had to go outside into the city and let them know that this was coming and this was about to happen. And the only way he was able to get outside the city was because the men were struck with blindness. So he goes outside the city to let them know, but he didn't have to go too far because it said every man in the city came. So I believe even his sons-in-laws were there at the door and wanted to have the sex with these men, because it said every man in the city was there, young and old. It didn't just say some of them. So his sons or his son-in-laws, those were the ones that weren't righteous either. So it says we are going to destroy it. Our Creator has become aware of the great outcry against them, and He has sent us to destroy it. So our Creator sent the angels to destroy the land of Sodom and Gomorrah because of their great outcry, which was the homosexuality was their great outcry. They were living in sin. There were a lot of sin going on, and He'll give us the grace. And some people say some sin, all sin is equal, but no, this is a great sin, the homosexuality. That's what it says. And Lot went out and spoke with his sons-in-law, who were right there. They were right there at the doorways. He didn't have to go looking through them throughout the city. He was right there, who had married his daughters, and said, get up and leave this place, because our Creator is going to destroy the city. But his sons-in-law didn't take him seriously. So you must have a whole bunch of men that were just struck and blind, didn't know what was going on, sitting there, right outside the house, talking amongst themselves to trying to figure out not only what was going on, is where their eyesight went. And Lot comes out of the house and tells them, I don't know if he whispered to them or said it loud so everyone could hear, but he said, you need to come in the house now. We need to get out of here, because this is a serious thing. You need to go home and get my daughters. You need to come in the house, and we need to get ready to get out of here. But they didn't take him seriously. When the morning came, and now remember, you had Lot in the house with the 2 angels and his wife and his 2 virgin daughters. That was the only ones in the house. It says, when the morning came, the angels told Lot to hurry up, get out, they said, and take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here. Otherwise you will be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he dilly-daddled, he took his time, so the men actually took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hand of his 2 daughters. And this is because our Creator was being merciful to him. Because even Lot wasn't taking them seriously. They say, get up and go right now. But he was taking his time. So in the mercy of our wonderful Creator, just like he had mercy on the sons-in-laws of Lot that were outside, that were just committing this great sin, he had mercy on them, and in his forgiveness was still willing to save them. But still, they denied him. Still, in his forgiveness. Well, here, it says Lot was just wasting his time and taking his time. So he was being merciful to him, and he wanted to show him salvation, so he led them. It said, leaving them outside the city. When they had brought them out, he said, flee for your life and don't look behind you. So he already gave them the mercy, and he pulled them, so he showed them his mercy, and I'm sure he showed them it much more than just here in this situation. And he's going to tell us over and over again what to do and how to do it. And if we don't listen, in his mercy, we might get through. We might make it through the day. But there's going to come a time when that time runs out. And we have to start listening to his instructions. His mercy is going to run out. He's not going to keep giving us chances to disobey him. Eventually, we're going to have to start obeying him. That's what's going to have to happen. Well, here is the time for Lot and his wife. His instructions of the Creator, the instructions were, flee for your life and don't look behind you. Flee for your life and don't look behind you. And don't stop anywhere in the plain, but escape to the hills. So he was told to go to the hills. Otherwise, you will be swept away. And Lot said to them, please, no, please, hear your servant. He has already found favor in your sight, and you have shown him even greater mercy by saving his life. But I can't escape to the hills, because I am afraid of the disaster that will overtake me, and I will die. So Lot was scared of going to the hills. Remember that. And he says, look, there's a town nearby to flee to, and it's a small one. Please let me escape there. Isn't it just a small one? And there I will stay alive? So he's saying, I don't want to go to these mountains. There's no way. But that's what our Creator told him to do. Go to the hills and stay there, and don't look behind you. But Lot said, please don't send me there. I don't want to go there. But our Creator replied, all right, I agree to what you have said. I won't overthrow the city which you have spoken. Hurry and escape there to that place, because I can't do anything until you arrive there. For this reason, his city name was named Tazor, or that means small. But really what it means, insignificant in Hebrew. It was an insignificant, a very small little city where he was going, where it was insignificant. It says, by the time Lot had come to Tazor, the sun had risen over the land, and then our Creator caused sulfur and fire to rain down on Sodom and Gomorrah, that came from the sky of our Creator. He overthrew those cities, the entire plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and everything growing on the ground. And then it says, so that's what happened there. So if you go to Israel today, you could actually go to where Sodom and Gomorrah was, and you could actually see the remains from the sulfur that came down. It actually encapsulated the whole city walls and everything, and you could go there, and some people actually grab a piece of the sulfur and bring it back. Pretty amazing thing. It's not what I recommend. I don't recommend bringing that stuff into your house, and I'll talk about that another time why. But that's what happened. It says, but here's a problem. His wife, it says in Genesis 19:26, but his wife looked back from behind him. It says, but. It didn't say and. It didn't say his wife. It says, but, meaning there's an issue here. He was told not to look back. It says, but his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a column of salt. She just, it was over for her, because she disobeyed and her time was up of following instructions or not following instructions. So that's what had happened there, and that's the story there. So now it says here that Abraham got up early in the morning and went to the place where he had stood before the Creator and looked out towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and scanning the entire plain. Then before him smoke was risen from the land, like smoke from a furnace. But when our Creator destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham and sent Lot out away from the destruction, where he overthrew the cities which Lot lived. So the reason why he saved Lot was because of Abraham, as it says right here. So keep that in mind for the future. It says, Lot went to this land, Tezorah, which was called insignificant, this small land, and lived, but it says, so it goes on to say that Lot went up from the land, Tezorah, and lived in the hills with his 2 daughters. Now listen, folks, the original instructions were for Lot to flee, don't look back, and go to the hills. And I believe and then Lot pleaded, please don't send us to the hills, send us to this insignificant land. And I believe that they were going towards this insignificant land, and what happened was, because our Creator made way to say you can go to Tezor, and then Sarah looked back, and she did what she was told not to do. She didn't follow the original instructions, and she was turned to a pillar of salt. And Lot said, wait a second. His instructions were to flee, not look back, and go to the hills. Well, I'm not heading towards the hills. I'm heading towards this little town. And I saw what happened to Sarah. I'm going towards the hills. You know, I'm getting in those hills because for some reason that's where my Creator wanted me, in those hills. So it says Lot went up from Tezor, and he lived in the hills with his 2 daughters. So he didn't want to stay in Tezor. He went there. But he saw what happened to Sarah, so he said, I'm going to get up to the hills, because that was the instruction. You know, he was afraid to stay in Tezor, this insignificant little land, because he knew he wanted to get right with our Creator, folks. He knew our Creator gave him a plan, and he gave him a plan for a reason. So him and his 2 daughters went and lived in a cave. And then they were in a cave for some time, and the firstborn said to the younger one, our father is old, and there isn't a man on the earth to come into us in the manner customary in the world. Come, let's have our father drink wine, and then we will sleep with him, and that way we'll enable our father to have descendants. Folks, you have to remember, even though his daughters were virgins, they were still in this town where all this rampant homosexuality was going on, and they got part of it in their hearts and in their minds. They weren't thinking righteous here, and they certainly weren't going out with the faith of our Creator by breaking Torah and doing this an abominable thing of sleeping with their father. You know, and then we look at wine. Actually, this is another place where wine is mentioned. We already saw it mentioned with Noah. Noah got drunk and he was naked and he wasn't ashamed, and then his sons had to come and cover him up. Well, here we see Lot getting drunk with wine and actually letting his daughters sleep with him. Look, alcohol was never meant to be a good thing, folks. It wasn't meant to be a good thing, especially when it's used the wrong way. And the real issue today is it's used the wrong way. People say, are you against alcohol? Are you against wine? Not if it's used the right way. But I'm telling you, it's not used the right way when you're using it to get something or using it to put yourself in a certain mood. That creates an issue. So they got their father drunk with the wine, and that night the older one went and slept with her father. And his father didn't know anything as he lay down and with her. And then she got up the next morning, or that night she got up. And the following day the older said to the younger, here, I slept last night with him. Now let's make him drunk again, and this night you'll sleep with him. You know, so he can have descendants. So they were trying to justify their unrighteous act for a righteous act. Folks, breaking Torah, you know, or living against the guidelines and instructions of our Creator are always going to have dreadful consequences. And they did these things which shouldn't have been done. And it says they piled their father up with wine that night. She got up and slept with him again. And both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. Now, who makes somebody pregnant? It's not the act of sleeping with somebody. It's the act of our Creator allowing it to happen. I know a lot of people are trying to conceive and they can't. But, you know, our Creator makes it happen. So our Creator is the one who allows it. And He allowed these things to happen. He allowed them to get pregnant. So He allowed them to conceive. The older one gave birth to a son, and he called it Moab. And then, you know, he called the ancestor Moab to this day. The younger also gave birth to a son. She called him Ben-Anami. And the ancestors of his people are Ammon to this day. Now, these were people, especially the Moab people, that came up against Israel later on. So this created a problem. Now, I don't know the reason why our Creator allowed them to conceive, but this created a people that was against Israel later on and created a problem. And then we go on to chapter 20 of Genesis. And in chapter 20, we basically see Abraham and Sarah going to another land. They're going towards the Negev between Kadesh and Shur. And Abraham says, we are aliens there, so when we get there, please lie to the men there and tell them you are my sister. So he's doing it again. He's lying again, or maybe he's not lying because they were a half brother and half sister. But he's telling her this again, and it's the same thing all over again. And then the same thing happened. They saw Sarah. They saw how beautiful she was. The king took her. But then it says directly here, remember before we were wondering in Genesis, we were wondering why or how the Egyptian king knew that it was Abraham's wife. We thought maybe Sarah told him, and I said no, it was our Creator telling him. Well, here it says our Creator revealed himself to the king here and said, you have took somebody's wife. And unless you let them go, you're going to have some trouble here. So the king came over to Abraham and said, why'd you do this terrible thing? So he got up early in the morning, he gave Abraham a whole bunch of gifts, and he sent him on his way. And he gave him female slaves as well. History played out itself all over again here. And it says one of the plagues that was set upon the people that did this here, that took Sarah away this time, was they were unable to conceive. See, this was considered a special holy thing, and people today, they just take it for granted. They don't understand how special this thing is. And there wasn't such thing as birth control. People wanted to conceive. They wanted to have children. And then it was taken away, and the children of the people of the land were able to have children again once the king revealed himself, once our king, Yahweh, revealed himself to the king of the land there, and the king of the land there gave Sarah back to Abraham, and then everyone was restored in the land. They were about to have children. They were able to have children. So we went through chapter 20, which was just repeating itself previously of what happened. So then we go to chapter 21, and all of this happened previously in the previous chapters. Was only 1 year with Sodom and Gomorrah and everything else that happened. It was only 1 year, because we see in chapter 21 it says Abraham remembered Sarah and remembered the promise that he told Sarah that she'd receive a son, and lo and behold, she does receive a son. So she conceived during all this time and everything that was happening, and 1 year later then she has a son, and Abraham names the son Isaac, or laughter. That was the name of the son, because what did he do? They laughed. So they named him Isaac, or laughter, and they circumcised the son. Now it says when this happened, Abraham was 100 years old, and his wife conceived at 90 years old. So Abraham was 100 years old when laughter was born to him. And then it said here, it goes on to say that our Creator has given me good reason to laugh, Sarah said. And now everyone can laugh with me because I have bore a son. So then the son is born, and then it goes on to say here, a little while later, the first son, Ishmael, that Abraham had with the slave girl, was making fun of Isaac. And then Sarah says, we got to send him away. And Abraham says, you deal with her the way you have to. So they send her away with the son Ishmael, and Abraham was feeling real bad about this, and our Creator says, don't be sad, don't be down. I will make a great nation out of him also, the son of the slave girl that you had, but all the nations are going to come through you. So don't be afraid. Abraham was told. He was told, don't be afraid again, and we saw in the previous readings he was told, don't be afraid, and that's what we are told, not to be afraid. But here's the big thing, folks. I want to get to chapter 22 of Genesis. Now, we've been discussing this, and every week I do the Torah portion here. You can see the previous readings, and we're going to go through all the readings here at Torah Life Ministries. But in chapter 22 of Genesis, it says, after all these things that have happened, our Creator tested Abram, and he said to him, here I am, Abram said. And he said, take your son Isaac and go and sacrifice him. You are to offer him as a burnt offering. And Abraham got up in the morning to go and do that. So after all this, Abram was still tested before the covenant can be confirmed. And Abram proved his heart to be righteous by actually taking action, and follow the instructions and the guidelines that he was told. And it's finally told here in Genesis 22:18, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And here it is, folks. Because you obeyed because you obeyed. That's it, folks. That's the whole significance of this week's reading. Is when you obey, you get what he told us we would get. The covenant becomes true. When you disobey, you get curses. When you obey, you get blessings. That's it. Do you want blessings or curses? Life or death? That's what it comes down to, everybody. So Abraham returned to his young men. They got up and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham settled in Beersheba. And then after that, it goes on to say that Abraham's descendants, his brother, also bore children, and one of those, or his descendants bore children, and one of those children was Rebekah in a land far away. That's what it was told to his concubine. So we know here that Abraham's brother had concubines and more than one wife. And we see here Abraham took the slave girl as his second wife. So we know that it was a custom then. It wasn't considered a bad thing or a wrong thing, that to have more than one wife, and conceiving was a blessing. So the idea back then for people to have more than one wife was not some lustful idea to just sleep with many women. It was to conceive and have as many children as possible. So that was the custom of that time. And remember, this was told that they bore somebody named Rebekah. They didn't say when, but it leads to believe it was recently that another child was born. But this is at the time when he just came off the mountain with Isaac. And we have to remember, Isaac wasn't a little baby. Isaac was grown up by this point. So, people misunderstand that. They don't understand. They think Isaac was some little tiny kid. No, he was grown up at this point when he was supposed to be sacrificed. So Isaac was grown up. The baby was just born. So that would leave him, years older than Rebekah was. And we'll see more about that and why that's interesting in the next reading. The next reading, by the way, is going to be for next week's Shabbat. Genesis 23:1 to 25:18. So after this week's Shabbat, you can start reading that before you hear this video. Genesis 23:1 to 25:18. But that, folks, was this week's Torah portion. Again, 18:1 to 22:24 of Genesis. Thanks for checking it out. If you have any comments or questions, please post them below the video. We're putting all the Torah portion videos here. You can go look at my channel, the previous ones. And we have many other guests on the show. We have Bible videos. We have many guests about many different topics. We just posted some great ones up this previous week. So please check them out. Until then, everybody, have a great Shabbat this coming Shabbat. Thanks for hanging in there and watching. And please, iron sharpens irons. So, learn and grow and teach me as well, and put some comments and questions below the video. Until then, everybody, have a great Shabbat and shalom, shalom.
Torah Life Ministries come out of the world. Messiah people seek the truth.